And we are back. Welcome to our latest Patreon bonus content, where myself and Sir Christian Cole, as he has decided to title himself over there, the great Christian Eulenberg, joining me once again. This time we are talking episodes 5 and 6 because we missed last week. So we are here to talk episodes 5 and 6. Before we get to that, though, a thank you to our lovely patrons who get early access to all of these great bonus content episodes. If you want to join in on all the fun, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can sign up for as low as $1 a month, and you get early access to all of these bonus content episodes, such as this, which is very exciting. Eventually, it will go to the public. It'll live up on YouTube. So if you're watching us after this has been released to the public, welcome to you all as well. Again, patreon.com/InSessionFilm if you want to get early access. And for those that are actually watching us that have their eyes glued to the screen and not just listening to this, I have to apologize to everyone in advance for my the Gandalf look that I am going for. Eventually, I'm on my way. You might not be able to tell in the video, but some of these hairs are starting to turn gray. So I might just go ahead and bleach them all gray just to kind of jumpstart the process. Anyway, I say all that to say I look like a mess because the last week and a half of my life has been a disaster, to say the least. I say that facetiously, but there's been so much going on that I haven't had time to shave.
Honestly, that's okay. Hey,
That's what it is.
If James Gunn can dye his hair gray, so can you.
Yeah.
Or silver, however.
Maybe part of it is I just saw the gray hairs and I was like, if I can turn into Gandalf the Grey, maybe I'll just let it go. I'll just let it go. Anyway, that is to say, I appreciate everyone that is tuning in. No matter how you are tuning in, always appreciate everyone joining us. And like we did last time, we're going to be jumping into this as one conversation. So no format necessarily. We'll just talk about episodes 5 and 6 as one collective experience. So with that said, Christian, let's jump into this. What did you think about episodes 5 and 6? How you feeling right now?
I'm trying to remember what happened in episode 5.
Oh my gosh.
But honestly, from what I remember, these are probably my two favorite episodes, along with episode 2.
Okay.
The entire series. Especially for episode 5, where Galadriel and everyone are finally leaving Numenor. And I'm like, thank God, because I'm like, if they're gonna be stuck here the entire season, I was gonna get very, very worried. But the plot is finally moving forward.
It is.
But
it is moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, episode 5 really just, especially towards the end, it kind of like you get that feeling like, yeah, like Lord of the Rings is back. And then you see episode 6 and it's like, yeah, Lord of the Rings is really back. Like you can definitely see these similarities from Peter Jackson's films and it's, I mean, Amazon knows that because they know that is the audience is going to be tuning into the show. So they're going to try to make it feel as similar as possible. Not as much as The Hobbit tried to with the Lord of the Rings, tried to, make it too much like Lord of the Rings, because I feel like Rings of Power is its own show. Like it does have its own identity, but there are a few similarities, but it's a good type of similarities that we see throughout, especially through episode 6, the Battle of the Men at the tower. It feels very Lord of the Rings like. It doesn't feel like this, cheap production. And especially with episode 6, you're now starting to understand why Amazon poured all this money into the show. It's fantastic.
Well, let me start off by saying this, and where you and I mostly disagree. I feel like is on the pacing of the show.
Mm.
Because I like it when shows take their time, because that is the brilliance of this format, right? Comparatively to a movie,
That
where
is
you
true.
you gotta move, and films often have to find that space to slow down. Peter Jackson did a great job of this. It's ultimately why those movies are 2.5, 3 hours long,
Yeah.
right? Because he wasn't afraid to slow down and emphasize character and emotion and theme, which is what makes the films as hefty as they are.
Mm.
But the great thing about a show like this is that you have even more time to flesh out all of that stuff. But that's also what has heightened the criticisms I've had that we've talked about the last few times, because when you have the time and space to fully realize your characters and the writing is so uneven, that's a problem. You have all this time and space. Now, to be fair, I do think that, like this season of The Rings of Power, it's jumping through 4 different, timelines,
Mhm.
and trying to take its time in all 4 of those timelines. And with The Lord of the Rings, you had your various storylines that Peter Jackson did a great job with. The pacing of those films is impeccable.
Mhm.
I am not against this show, slowing things down, building everything up that it needs to, because eventually, as the snowball starts to go down the hill, the momentum will pick up and the action will be much more frequent, I imagine. So
Oh,
anyway,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of what I anticipate. I'm sure that's what we all kind of anticipate.
Mhm.
So to take your time in season 1, establish these characters, establish their motives, I don't have a problem with that. I like that the show is slowing it down until we get to episode 6, obviously.
Yeah.
My problem has always been the writing of this show. I just feel like it's uneven. And with
Yeah.
episode 5 specifically, that still continues to be my problem.
Mm.
I still don't think the writing is wholly even. And I don't know what the writing structure was as to who wrote what in the writer's room, but it does feel like as if there was 1, maybe 2 people tasked to each storyline and they didn't touch anything else. And so you have 6 writers that are in their own little cubicle that are only writing their characters and their storyline. I don't know if that's true. That it's probably not true, but that's how it feels to me. Because everything with Derwin and Elrond, for example, I love all of that is so great, and because it's so good, I cannot fathom that the same people are writing other storylines that are not very good,
Yeah.
and it somewhat drives me crazy that I have to compartmentalize the show that way, or if the writing is sectioned off that way. I don't know, but the final product does feel disjointed because the writing, I don't think, is all the way there. The pacing of the show I love. I'm not against that. Obviously, the set designs, the costuming, everything we see on camera, you're right, the money is being poured into that, and it's great.
Yeah.
The writing has suffered for me, though, and it very much continues to be the case in episode 5. It's not, the worst thing. It's not the worst episode, even in that regard, that we've talked about so far, but I still very much felt it, especially with the Galadriel stuff. As much as I want to like Galadriel, I feel like this show is doing everything in its power to make her not an interesting
Likeable.
character. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't, and again, I'm trying to be fair because maybe that's the point. Maybe it's building to something, but I'm still trying to understand what that is. And at this point, I'm dubious. I don't know if the forcefulness of that character is wholly necessary, but maybe there'll be a payoff to it. I don't know. So I'm trying to reserve judgment, but as it is right now, I'm really struggling with that character outside of episode 2. I loved her in episode 2, but beyond that, I've really struggled. Although I will say she has more of a limited role in episode 6.
Mm.
And again, I think about the dichotomy of that character, right? Because there's that moment where they first show up there, and there's that initial little battle, where they capture evil elf. Forgive me, the name of the character is escaping me for the moment, but so they capture him, right? And then as Hellbrand is about to kill him, and that's a great moment. Like his vengeance is palpable, right?
Yeah.
And she stops him from killing him. I need him alive, she says.
She says,
right?
Don't you dare.
Don't you dare kill him. I need him alive.
Yeah.
Literally, Christian, the next scene. She tries to kill him.
I feel like it was more of a they had each other's back kind of thing.
And
but
like
she got closer than he did.
But that's what I mean. Like, I understand, like, dramatic irony is a tool that I love. When writers and filmmakers use dramatic irony, it is often brilliant. Like, we're in the middle, on the main show. A little plug here. We're doing a series on Studio Ghibli, right?
Sir.
And Studio Ghibli are the masters of that. Like, they're really great at using irony in their movies, and they do it in a way that's organic, that feels natural. It's interwoven so beautifully into those stories. And here I feel like it's not the idea, because you're right. The fact that they have each other's backs is a poignant idea on paper, but in execution, it just feels so utterly manufactured, because in one moment she's like, I need him alive. And it's the next scene. Literally the next moment. It's like she completely forgot that that's what she said. And to me, because of the execution, it just comes off really manufactured, and it just doesn't work for me. Although I do like that the show calls attention to that, though, because Hellbrand has a line where he's like, where she's like, she succumbs to the notion that she failed, right? And she's like, I should have done that. And he's like, I got your back because you did it for me first. Okay, so I like that the show does call attention to it, but that series of events, just from an execution standpoint, to me, it just felt like I was stepping on rocky edges.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just so disjointed. Like, it just.
Fair enough. Yeah, it is very jarring. Or it's like she's like, no, I need him alive, like you said, and then literally the next scene they have like the Dark Elf and Galadriel have like this super long conversation, and then it's like, okay, it's an interesting one, and then she holds the knife to his throat. I was like, Galadriel, what are you doing? You literally.
And that's a great point. I'm glad that you said that, because it's not even that she scolds Hellbrand. Maybe that's a little forceful of a word, but like she tells him that, she needs him alive. But then what else does she say to him? She says that you can't quench your thirst by drinking from the sea.
Yes. Yeah.
Meaning that you can't quench your thirst for vengeance. Like it won't satisfy you. Killing him right now, speaking to his vengeance, right? But the whole conversation she has with the Dark Elf in that barn is all about her own vengeance. It's all about her getting the Sauron so she can get hers. So again, it's like a complete 180 from the moment we just had 30 seconds ago.
We almost found out what happened to Sauron, and then that stupid orc had to come up. I was like, you son of a bitch.
Well, I guess, spoiler alert, if we're getting into spoilers here, but because he says that he kills him. Yeah. And, but we know Sauron's not dead. We know that's not the case. But he says that he kills him. Galadriel doesn't believe him. And again, that whole scene is about her own vengeance. Literally right off the heels 30 seconds ago, where she tells Hellbrand, your vengeance is not appropriate at this time. But mine is.
But mine is.
Mine is. What?
Because I'm the main character.
This is what I mean about the writing being so uneven. And
show's
to
about
me, maybe it's aiming for dramatic irony, but to me, it doesn't feel like that. It feels just like total contradiction. Like these writers have no clue what they're doing.
Oh.
And it makes for a really frustrating experience for me.
Oh, that is fair. Where it is, you have these two characters that are having this heart to heart, saying, you can't kill the Stark Elf. I think they preferred to call them like Urond or something like that.
Yeah, like Urks or something like that.
Yeah, orcs, because like for anyone who doesn't know, like orcs were originally elves, and then that whole weird metamorphosis thing happened. But it's kind of like how orcs are made. It kind of sucks, but it is weird how it's like, oh, like we can't kill him. I need his information, and then literally the next scene, it does feel like a complete 180. I seriously, she kind of nicks his throat there a little bit. Like
she does.
Like, it's like, don't you forget,
I will say though, while we're on episode 6, and I know that you're probably itching to talk about that, I wanted to emphasize that moment because it further exemplifies my frustration with the show's writing, especially with Galadriel, a character that I really want to love because I can sense the denseness of that character, the complexity of it. I don't mind that she's wholly I don't mind that there's an unlikable nature to her. But at some point you have to draw that allure. And outside of episode 2, it just hasn't been there. I don't think it's the performance.
She does a great job.
The performance. I'm mostly liking the performance. I think it's mostly the writing, but it could be partially the performance. But I don't think the material she's given necessarily evokes allure. It just feels as if she's drowning in just this despondency, I guess. And so and to me, it's just the back and forth nature of that. There's no consistency to her whatsoever. So I find it frustrating. But that aside, episode 6, aside from that little dynamic we just talked about, is pretty good, especially because of, finally we're getting the culmination of 5 episodes building to this point. Where there hasn't been much action, although we can talk about the wolf sequence of episode 5, but there hasn't been a ton of action. It's been a lot of character building, a lot of world building, a lot of lore, and I've liked that so far. And then, boy, does it really come to a head here in episode 6. Lots of action. It's all there on the screen. And it's well done. It's really well done. I have to give the show credit. It did feel reminiscent of Peter Jackson.
Yeah, it felt like the battles of Helm Deep when Numenor finally came in to save the day. I thought the bait and switch where have their humans are killing other humans, saying that they're orcs. It's like, of course, that dwindles their numbers by half. Divide and conquer. Kind of situation. I'm like, that was actually pretty clever. But yeah, it's with and I guess for like my issues with the show when it comes to like pacing, it's not that like, oh yeah, like we're not getting all these action sequences. I was feeling like my stay was overwhelmed a little bit in Numenor because I felt like they were focusing on these smaller characters that I don't even know if we're gonna see ever again. Maybe in like season 2 for like a hot second. Like it's like Isildur's sister. I was like, I mean, yeah, she's there. That's cool. But
because there's like that whole subplot with that Isildur's sister and that guy that's trying to pursue her romantically.
Yeah, that guy. I forgot his name. I'm like, I don't
what is that? Is that going to turn into anything now that we're away from Numenor?
Yeah. I'm like, those are the small things that were bugging me leading up to episode 5/6. is that like we were focusing on these other characters in Numenor, where I was like, I mean, we're already like following 4 different storylines. Do I really care if Isildur's sister is going on a date with some random dude?
Yeah.
No, I don't really care. But I mean, I the ending of episode 5 was so good. Not only yes, because they were finally leaving Numenor, but it had a sense of a sense of adventure. Like, you know, we're gonna go to Middle Earth, we're gonna save the Southlands, and I forgot the guy's name, the new king of men. You know, he's gonna come back and
are you talking about Helbron?
Yeah, Halbrand.
Yeah.
You know, he's gonna come back and take what's rightfully his, you know, kind of lead the humans into a better path. And
Which was a great moment when he
Yeah.
stepped into that role.
Oh, it's
near
great.
the end. Very, very well done. Yeah.
And even with your background for Galadriel's armor, it looks fantastic.
It is funny. For those watching on YouTube, I just spent 20 minutes criticizing the writing of Galadriel, but that's my background right now. One and only.
It's some pretty awesome armor. Like, it really is.
I mean, I have nothing to complain. I don't think anyone is criticizing this show aesthetically.
No,
it looks really great visually.
But yeah, the writing for sure. I do agree with you when it comes to a lot of those things, and I feel like it feels uneven because there are episodes where we really love, and then this is actually the first time we get 2 episodes back to back that people are loving, and then we only have 2 more after this, so it's like, what else is? I mean, you know, within episode 6, you know, we get that big battle sequence, which is most of the episode. I mean, Galadriel kind of like hanging off her horse definitely gave me Legolas vibes there for sure. I absolutely love that. But I wonder where I guess we would see Sauron, because I guess we got to a lot of these storylines are kind of crossing through. You know, we had the elf with the tower, and now like the whole Numenor thing. So the only other 2 plot lines, I guess, would be the Durin, Elrond, and then the Harfoots. I don't know if they're gonna really cross paths or not, but I'm interested to see, because we only have 2 episodes left. Granted, I know we're not gonna get answers to everything in, you know, within the first season, because, you know, that's what cliffhangers are for, to continue the story. So not everything will be wrapped up, but more of the smaller things will be.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where these next 2 episodes go, especially given that, you know, that cliffhanger we get at the end of episode 6. That should be really interesting to see how things play out in these last 2 episodes.
That was insane.
As far as Sauron goes, and every time that he comes up, and I know this is still in the discourse heavily, every episode that we get just continues to heighten my theory that we haven't seen him yet. I just don't think we've seen him yet.
No,
especially given what we hear in episode 6 and the mystery of him. I just don't think that we've seen him yet, but he is on the horizon. I don't know if he'll show up by the end of this season. It wouldn't surprise me if the last episode, the final cliffhanger leading into season 2, is like the final shot of it is Sauron. Like that's the final shot we get. And then you have to spend all of that time in between 1 and 2 anticipating what's going to happen next. That makes sense to me. But as we've discussed with these writers, who knows? Maybe we shouldn't hold our breath on that. But as far as, you know, as far as like kind of leading to what we see here, though, I do like the action, how everything is staged here. There is a cleverness to the action as well. That kind of goes back and forth, where it kind of is a tug of war a little bit, where the people of the Southland kind of get an upper hand, and the orcs get an upper hand at one point. So I do like how that whole episode, really up until the very end, right? Because even after the battle is over and Galadriel and the people of Numenor come in and they save the day.
Mm.
Then there's that final little reveal at the end that gives the orcs again the upper hand as the episode comes to a close. So, like individually, there might be some little writing things that I don't care for, as we talked about.
Mhm.
But collectively, looking at it more broadly, I do like the writing from that perspective, as far as getting from A to Z. I think they did a good job there,
Mhm.
from a broad plotting perspective. And then even circling back to episode 5 a little bit, things of that from a writing and an execution standpoint, I really like, because we teased a second ago that there's the moment where I'm just going to call him Gandalf because that's who I think he is. But Mystery Man, saves them from the wolves, which was a nice little moment as well. So I don't know if I love these 2 episodes, or at least episode 5, as much as others have,
Right.
but I do think from a larger perspective, they're doing some things well. The Isildur stuff, I'm really liking as well. That's one thing that has really started, like from episode to episode, is really starting to gain steam for me. And that to me is a great use of dramatic irony, is to give Isildur this interesting arc of, I don't know what I want to do. He's a little bit lost. He's a part of the Sea Guard, but he wants to get out of the Sea Guard.
Mm.
Does so, but it cost him and his friends a spot in the Sea Guard. There's some drama there that comes to a head. And, I do like that moment where he's like, where he apologizes to his friend. And he's like, you can hit me. And then he lets the guy hit him, and then he still doesn't get his way anyway.
No.
Like that's a good character moment, like a good character learning moment. Then there's all this stuff with his father. I want to be part of this, and his father's not willing to succumb to nepotism.
Mm.
Really doesn't. I mean, he eventually gives him a spot, but like lowest on the totem pole kind of thing.
Stable boy.
Stable boy. Yeah. And so, I've liked the Isildur stuff. It started to allure me to him. I do find him compelling. And of course, again, circling back to dramatic irony, we know where that character ends.
Yeah.
His whole story comes to an end, comes to this tragic ending of him giving into the power of the ring and him holding on to it. And then of course he's ambushed and he's shot and killed, and and that's it. Like that's where we know that's where the character is going to end. And it is kind of this heartbreaking, selfish act that he has at the end of his life. So to build him up in this endearing way now does eventually add, some layered poignancy to that character. So I do like how they're building that up, because so far this show hasn't been all that emotionally involving for me. I've enjoyed it for the most part. But that moment in episode 6, when he's running toward his father and he thinks that he's in danger and he kind of embraces him, I kind of choked up. I'm not going to lie. That's so. And then there's, at the very end of the episode, they have a really touching moment together where they're talking about his mother, Isildur's mother. So like that's the part of the show where they're finally starting to hook me emotionally a little bit. So for all of my frustrations, there are things the show is doing that, if they maintain consistency, eventually those good things will bust through a barrier, and it almost won't matter my criticism. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'll certainly, I'm starting to like the things I like more so, not liking the things I don't like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Everything you said pretty much, I mean, you nailed it on the head, honestly. I could not have said it better myself. Yeah, when it is interesting when you talk about Isildur and we know where his journey is, he feels like the same character clearly Galadriel has a longer lifespan, so
Mhm.
this may be like preteen Galadriel for all we know. But I
Yeah,
do agree.
I'm curious to see how they connect those dots.
Yeah, because it's like two totally different characters. And I feel like she did say in one of the episodes, one of the early episodes, that I was a completely different person back then. And yeah, there's something with her character. Maybe now that she's back in Middle Earth, we can kind of see more consistency from her. Because when she was in Middle Earth, searching for Sauron, that's when I liked her.
Mhm.
And then she left and became bossy little Missy for like
Yeah. I mean, on that note, can I actually tell you maybe my favorite moment of the episode? And it's so ironic, and maybe it's ironic that we're bringing up irony again, but to me, it's really ironic because, I criticize the contradictory nature of the writing of Galadriel in episode 6. I still don't think that works for me, but there is a possibility that in hindsight, once this series is over, we look back on it and go, I see what they were doing. And some of this will start to fix itself for me. We'll see. We'll have to circle back whenever we get to that end point. But one of the reasons I think that very well could be the case is, we joked earlier about how Galadriel says, okay, I need him alive. You can't kill him, and don't worry about your vengeance. Let's worry about mine. she has that secret conversation with the dark elf, and they're having their verbal sparring. And of course, it's all about her wanting to know where Sauron is so she can get her vengeance. The great thing about that moment is when the dark elf says to her, I am not the only one consumed by the darkness. Speaking to her vengeance.
Yes.
An incredible line.
Yes.
And it's an incredible line. And of course, that's when she loses it. But that to me was utterly brilliant. And it very well could speak to what you're talking about. And we did even mention this all the way back to episode 1 when we were talking about this is such a very different Galadriel than what we know of. Like,
it's very hit or miss.
And even to the broader point of, what we know of the story of Sauron and Isildur and the Lord of the Rings, like in Peter Jackson's movies, Galadriel, unless I'm completely missing something, and I might be, if anyone listening has any information, please feel free to let me know that I'm being an idiot here. But from my recollection of it, she's nowhere to be found. We talked about that heavily for episode 1. But maybe there is something to be said about this time of her life. Maybe she is completely different than what we know her to be during the time of the Lord of the Rings. And maybe, and that's why I'm willing to be open here and open to seeing where this goes, because of moments like that where she because we know she's consumed with vengeance,
right?
And now the dark elf is recognizing that as well. The show is recognizing that in Galadriel. So I love that moment. I love that where it speaks to the darkness in Galadriel. And we've talked about how either it's the performance, it's the writing, it's the combination of it. It just hasn't made Galadriel all that alluring as a protagonist. But maybe she's not supposed to be. Maybe she is kind of a villain here, at least to start, because she's so consumed with vengeance. Maybe that is the point. And I'm willing to give that a shot, because that could be compelling. Like if by the end of it, that vengeance eventually she realizes it, she learns to let it go, and by the end she becomes a completely different person, and then ultimately turns into the character that we know from the Lord of the Rings. Maybe that's where this is going. So in execution, it's a little dodgy for me right now, but in hindsight, I might have a very different opinion.
That is a very good observation because it is. I mean, it's all about character growth. You know,
Hmm.
even though Galadriel isn't matching what we've seen, the elegant Galadriel that we see in
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings, I think it is something with character growth there.
Hmm.
When it comes to her development, I mean, because we she doesn't really, she's not very combative in Lord of the Rings, but I mean, it was she's also in the Hobbit movies.
Hmm.
Because something with I think Gandalf had like a crush on her or something at some point, and everyone's falling for Galadriel.
I mean, it's Kate Blanchett. Of course,
That is very
everyone's
true.
gonna fall for Kate Blanchett.
But I specifically remember some part in The Hobbit. I'm like, is Gandalf like sweet on Galadriel right now? Like, how did this whole thing happen? But
Yeah,
back to episode 6 when it comes, just her fighting style where she's kind of like off the horse a little bit, like leaning on
yeah,
the
yeah.
side. Like all these like Home Alone kind of traps that they that they make for the orcs, which I thought was actually very clever for humans because I'm like, oh, they're all gonna die. I
Yeah.
that's what I thought. And then
They had to
um
get clever, right? Like that's the only chance they had.
yeah, I mean the orcs got pretty clever by sending in, their first reinforcements, but even with
Exactly. Yep.
with Theo's mother, that was probably the most, I guess, graphic scene we've seen in
Yeah, probably.
Lord
Yeah.
of the Rings. I mean, Game of Thrones, they're everywhere. House of the Dragon
Yeah.
are everywhere. I'm a messed
Yeah.
up person. I'm sorry, but yeah, that scene where it's like, I always knew that like Theo like likes or like loved his mom, but it's like we're starting to see how much he actually cares about his mom because I thought
Mhm.
Theo was gonna go like rogue with the Helts
Mhm.
altogether because I
Yeah.
thought it was gonna be like possessing him essentially. And I was like, oh, I guess
Yeah.
it kinda did.
It kind of which he speaks to, right? Talks
Yeah.
about how he's feeling a
And
lostness.
and he feels invincible with it. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh-oh.
I mean, and I think you could sense that, and maybe this is a credit to the performance because I think you do sense that in the character when he is wielding it, even without him speaking to that.
Mhm.
You certainly get, the feel that he is feeling that invincibility.
Yeah.
And I like that moment. I like that he spoke to it. And you're right, his relationship with his mom, you certainly feel that in the moment when they're patching her up there. But even
Whew.
before the battle, that moment when he asked her to speak to this lullaby that she used to sing to him,
Mhm. Yeah.
to say to him, was really beautiful. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean that dynamic has been pretty good too. I've certainly enjoyed seeing where that goes, especially because in another thing that his mom speaks to when Hellbrunn shows up, or she's talking to the Queen of Numenor and is like, I
Mm.
didn't really ask for this leadership position thing. It was just kind of
Yeah.
thrust onto me,
Right.
and then it leads to the Hellbrunn stuff. So you know,
Yeah. And
So I
then
I am liking those kind of little intimate moments, those little character moments in episode 6 especially,
mm.
aside from my contradictions with Galadriel. But like even inside that there's some good stuff. But yeah, I mean I think for the most part episode 6 is easily my favorite since episode 2. Hands
Yeah.
down.
I mean, the creation of Mount Doom, like that is what we
Yeah.
get. I was
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
sitting there, I'm like, what is happening right now? I'm like, oh, okay. The old bait and switch with the hatchet. I was like, oh man. And then
Mhm.
the old guy who, you know, like takes half of the humans. I guess it was like a key in the ground, and it just
Mhm.
I was like, is that
How
Mount
did he
Doom?
know how to do that? How
I
did he
don't
know?
know. He's been looking for Sauron. A lot of people have been,
That's true.
including us, have been looking for
Does
Sauron.
that make him more powerful than Galadriel? Because that's another thing that they speak to. Was that episode 5 or was it 6? I can't remember. But there's a moment where someone speaks to Galadriel about
Mm,
how Or maybe it's when she was speaking to the dark elf. I can't remember. Anyway, there's a moment where someone says to her, like, you were looking for Sauron, you couldn't find him. Like, you failed in your mission.
I think that was with the dark elf.
Yeah. I think that's something that he pointed out to her.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
I had to put subtitles on for this one. I was like, some of these accents are too thick.
But anyway, and we know that anyway, because regardless of the specifics of it,
we know her failures.
We know her failures. She's been looking for Sauron, has failed. This guy finds the key. I found him, guys. I found him. What?
I was like, oh, that's why they're like digging all the tunnels and everything to like, well, obviously because the dark elf was talking about how he wanted to create a home for the orcs, and it's like, well, what better than Mount Doom? Yeah, I was like, oh man, I'm like the volcano's erupting. I'm like, there's no way that's Mount Doom. I'm like, no, that's Mount Doom. Like, that is where it gets forged, and we have yet to see the other rings come into play. But I don't know. I really just enjoy how like episode 5 and 6 are finally like these story beats are starting to finally come across each other, because the main character, obviously Galadriel, she's off in Numenor for about 2, 3, 4, 5 for 4 episodes
since the end of episode 2.
Since the end of episode 2. And I was like, okay, so what's happening here? But I really love how like, oh, it's humans helping humans. Even like the Numenors are I think they are blessed with longer life, I believe so.
I think so,
yeah. But I wonder for the eruption of Mount Doom, is that going to cause destruction in Numenor?
I don't know,
because I know they're like 1,000 leagues away from each other, but weirder things have happened.
And that's what's going to be really interesting about the opening of episode 7.
Yes,
you get the eruption there, and that little village there is absolutely being demolished. And even visually, that last shot of the ash going over Galadriel, like, what is that all about?
Yeah, I remember that from the promo shots. I was wondering when that was going to pop up, because she just stares everything into the face, and I was like, that was such a beautiful shot. I was like,
so I'm really curious to see how all of this plays out logistically, how it changes Middle Earth, even like geographically speaking, as you're talking about. Could have huge ramifications. Obviously, it does, but to what extent? And I'm really curious as to does that affect the Harfoots and where they're at right now? Who we once again didn't get. See, this is the second episode in the last 3 where they haven't been a part of the show at all.
Yeah, so, what's going on?
I don't know. It's like they introduced Mystery Man. They teased him a little bit where he caught the tent on fire or whatever, and then that was it. And he saves them from the wolves, and that's all we've seen with them.
That's literally it. We just know that they're migrating. So where are they going?
And maybe that's part of my frustration with this season too. While I've enjoyed the larger perspective world building for the most part, but there is this, and again, just going back to the uneven nature of the writing, because we've talked about the last few episodes, or the last few times you and I have talked, how the stuff in Numenor has been so disjointed. We haven't really loved all of that stuff.
Yeah, that was the only issue I had. I was like, when is all this gonna be over? That's why.
But we spend so much time there, and very little time with little Miss Frodo.
Yeah,
and so I'm. Could we have spent less time in Numenor and more time with Mystery Man and the Harfoots? Like, that would have been more fun.
I think so, because this man like fell from the sky, and it's like, no, like everyone kind of accepts it. No one's really asking how or why. and
Yeah.
he's just one of their cart bearers.
They've just embraced them now. Yeah.
Wow.
And that it, well, I mean, part of the allure with Nori anyway, who again, Frodo for the sake of this show, I do like how she has convinced everyone that he's not, a murderer that's just going to be killing everyone in their sleep. So like there is something that's really fascinating about that to me. And then they've had some really interesting, intimate conversations, like that moment where he, tells her that he is, what was the word that she used? That he
Like a
is
danger or
like a
something.
danger or death, because he speaks to the moment where he killed the fireflies,
Yeah.
and she's like, "No, you're not that.
Like a
you're not.
threat or something.
Yeah,
like
you're not a
that.
threat. You're
Mhm.
not death. It was just an accident. Is all
Mhm.
that was." So that to me has been compelling, and I would like to see more of that. Eventually, we will, obviously, and
Mhm.
it looks like it's going to be mostly in season 2, because I don't, at this point, with the stakes, with the world building and Sauron, and now this volcano, how are you going to juxtapose that with Nori and the rest of the Harfoots off in
I don't know where they're going.
the Shire?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's not where they are, but they might as well be, right? Like, often wherever they are, unless they're close to the volcano too, but we don't really realize that yet. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I
So,
agree. Yeah, I really wish we would have gotten a little bit more Nori, just because I feel like that is my favorite story plot, and everyone wants to know who the mystery man is. I think it is Gandalf. Looks extremely like him. Like
it's Gandalf.
yeah,
It's totally
it
Gandalf.
has to be. So it is interesting to see, like, since we only have 2 more episodes left, how are they going to incorporate the Harfoots into it? Maybe they'll be in episode 9. I mean, sorry, episode 7, but not episode 8.
Wouldn't that be hilarious if they end episode 6 on this massive moment? Mount Doom being created, as you talked about,
Mm.
just incredible ramifications, right? Physically, emotionally, geographically. And then all of episode 7 was just about Nori and Mystery Man. Like,
I'll
we
be
don't
okay
we
with
don't
that.
see any of it. Like, it's just exclusively Nori. So you got to wait 2 episodes to see the
This
reveal to
is
that.
the Nori show.
They should do that. Yeah.
I actually like that a lot, just because I feel like we haven't. I mean, well, from episode 5, they were telling to leave him behind. I was like, excuse me, we're not leaving anyone
Yeah.
behind. They're like, oh, like cut their wheels or whatever. I was like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'm
what?
telling you,
What?
those Harfoots are dark. They are dark creatures.
They
They're
are.
extremely dark. I mean, they come off as like these really affable, fun-loving,
They will leave you
person.
high and dry when it comes to
They
migration.
don't care about you. They will absolutely leave you high and dry. That is such a fascinating dynamic. I would love the show to explore that more. I mean,
Please
there was
do.
the one character is like, just leave them to the wolves.
I was
Like,
what?
What
That
is
is your
happening right now?
kin. That is literally your kin. Like,
Yeah.
why? Why are you even doing that? Like,
It to me, like, it just makes that moment when they're reminiscing about their lost compadres all the more insane to me. Absolutely insane.
it's all
I don't know why they have that custom if really deep down they don't care. Like,
No, they don't. They're like, oh yeah, like we'll put you in the back of the caravan.
Yeah.
Whatever happens to you,
yeah,
happens.
bye. See you guys.
And if you
Good
die,
luck.
we'll remember you, and that's it.
Yeah.
But the
It's
skies are strange. That's
fascinating. I mean, there's a horror movie waiting to be written there. Like, I would love to take that sort of a concept and apply it to, like, because that is absolutely incredible to me.
a Hobbit horror.
A Hobbit horror movie. Yeah. A Harfoot horror movie.
There you go.
They will leave you behind this summer.
They're back again. Is no more.
Yeah, exactly.
Abandon all hope.
Exactly. I am waiting for that to happen. So get on that, Jeff Bezos. That'll be the spin-off series to the Rings of Power.
They really have been pushing this this series, though. I've noticed since it has been going. During the very beginning, not as much. I feel like they just, I mean, Game of Thrones kind of already had like a little bit of an early start, but yeah, I think for the marketing so far, I mean, especially during Thursday Night Football, they push it so much. But everyone I've talked to enjoys it. They love the world of of Lord of the Rings, and how the Rings of Power kind of just sets things up for Lord of the Rings. I do like how they are able to set things up without everything being in your face, because like it's not like, oh, look, there's a Isildur. It's like, we know who he is, but like he's just as common as a character as everyone else. It's not like the Star Wars effect. They're like, oh, look at this Easter egg. Do you guys remember this? Remember this from the original trilogy kind of thing? And it's like they're letting it unfold in a very natural way.
Yeah, love that. Before we get out of here, I do think we should talk about the Elrond Durin storyline in episode 5.
Oh yeah,
because I do think that's pretty great too. And again, for a little bit of context, it's we've mostly found that relationship unfolding in the mountains at Derwin's home, but now the table, has been flipped. The table has been turned, where Derwin is now with the elves, and he's trying to find out what is really going on. And we come to see that he's equally as good at maybe pulling those political strings as Elrond is. In fact, maybe that's where he learned how to do that, because I do love how he was provoking the elven leaders there a little bit, and makes up this whole thing about tables. And it's this custom that's it's so meaningful to me and my kind, and he made the whole thing up, and it was really funny. And then he comes to find out the truth that Elrond was there for a purpose, but he didn't know that he was there for the Mithril. He didn't know that initially. And then they have to find a compromise, and they do, without any bloodshed. Just fascinating. And it speaks to, I can't help but think about the Fellowship of the Ring a little bit, like the meaning of fellowship, like the meaning of friendship. How often can political divide and the conflict that usually comes, how often can that be avoided through simple friendship and camaraderie and finding a resolution that works for both parties? Because that's ultimately what happens here. It's like, it would have been easy for Derwin to hear the truth and go, you know what, screw you all, I'm going back home, let's prepare for war. He could have chose that, but he didn't. He chose to listen to his friend. Elrond regurgitated that friendship back, and they found this middle ground. Now, things could still unravel. It is a show after all, so we expect drama. Something is going to go awry. But I did find that really fascinating, though, to see how quickly the tension dissipated when they got together to have that simple conversation. And maybe again, it also speaks to the power of truth, and how meaningful that is. And that's the thing about the rings and the so-called power that comes with them. It's all false, right? It's something that's all manufactured. There's nothing real about that power.
No, not
there
at
is
all.
Real power in truth and friendship. And man, does that come through viscerally in that moment. I thought that was great.
I agree with you because as soon as Elrond's like, oh, like I have a confession, I'm like, oh man, they're gonna start fighting again. And
Mhm.
then it's funny because Durin gets like this nice little like ego boost because we find out about the Mithril, why the elves need it for survival.
Mhm.
And you get Durin. Well, Elrond's like, yeah, like he's like the fate of the elves are in your hand. And
Yeah.
Durin's like, whose hands are they in?
Yeah. He does it like 2 or 3 times. Like, I have the power here, right? Like, it's
He
me.
is eating, he's enjoying every
Every ounce of it,
moment
yeah.
of that's just, man, it's up to me. And he's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I see. But that part, it really put a smile on my face because he just
Yeah.
had this really big smirk. He's like, oh,
And Elrond knew it. Elrond knew that he would love that, that it would
yeah.
mean something to him to
And
just
he
kind of
took it
play into
better
that.
this time
Yeah.
because their friendship has been restored. Where
Mhm.
he's like, I mean, he just came out and said, like you said, he was there. He thought he was there to fix a friendship, but it turned out to be something else because Elrond was lied to about the
Mhm.
real reason why he was there. And Doran actually takes it into account this time instead of just going back. And like it would have been,
Mhm.
maybe it would have been frustrating if he were if Durin like blew off Elrond again, but it's like, at this point, I feel like they've definitely moved past that. And he's like, hey, like, I just want to let you know because I mean, Elrond's been put in this very terrible position too, where his king wants him to spill the secret, and he's like, I can't because I made a
Mhm.
promise to a friend.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
not just any friend, it's a fucking dwarf. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
apologies for my language,
You
but
swore on our podcast. Christian. Your
I'm
name is Christian.
I try not to
Swearing on no,
on
it's fine.
anyone's. But it's just, yeah, you can really feel the tension where Elrond's like, I can't tell you. And then his king's like, well, we
Yeah.
kind of need this on the base of the survival of your own race. So what is that promise really worth to you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
clearly it means a lot to Elrond because he knows how badly he's kind of unbeknowingly like messed up within 20 years of not visiting his friend. And he's like, I've mended this friendship, which almost seemed like an impossible task at first. And he's like, I don't want to undo that ever, like again, and have to go through that all over again to gain my friend's trust again, because
Yeah.
that's not fair to Durin at all. So
Mhm.
Durin's just having a kick.
Yeah,
I
and
love
and
it.
it's and it's also interesting too because we do come to find out more of and again, it speaks to what I was saying earlier about the idea of truth. Maybe Elrond would have approached things a little differently from the start if he knew the truth of why he was going to the mines to begin with or to the mountain
Yeah.
to begin with. But he
Mhm.
didn't know. He was in the dark.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely. I'm
and
sure
once
Elrond would have told him for sure.
yeah, and once he finds out what's really going on, and that is people are dying, well,
Yeah.
now he's at a crossroads, right? Where it's I have to tell Derwin what's happening here. We need the mithril or we're toast. We need it.
Yeah.
We have to have it or it's lights out.
Yeah.
And again, to that idea of truth, like why hide that from Elrond?
Mhm.
Like that feels like important information for him to have.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so that was an interesting little reveal. But I will say, dramatically speaking, from a writing perspective as well, I do like that how the show kind of builds that up. The fact that the elves, like the elven leaders, they don't tell Elrond. He finds out this way. It
Being
it's what makes that moment at the end of episode 5 between them all the more powerful.
Yeah.
Because if Elrond knew beforehand, we don't get that moment. And cinematically, it's so great. Like from a writing standpoint, it's so tender and beautiful and poignant.
Mm,
So, you know, I like the irony, I guess, of the Elven leaders not telling Elrond.
mm,
It certainly speaks again to that idea of truth and the power it has. But from a writing perspective, it's really brilliant writing because it leads to that great moment at the end. So
mm.
again, I cannot fathom whoever is writing that is also writing Galadriel. It's just not the same people.
No,
I
I don't.
refuse to believe it.
I think you might be right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like there's no way there's this much inconsistency. There has to be multiple writers, especially for trying to follow 4 storylines. So there has to be multiple writers for that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, looking here as far as the series writing credits on IMDb, there is quite a few people listed here. So it's hard to say who wrote what
Mhm.
and if it was a full episode or just a part of an episode. I don't really know. And I don't know if they'll ever hand out that information, but um
That's what they
I imagine the people writing Derwin and Elron not handling other aspects of the show.
no.
Anyway, we've gone on quite a bit here, Sir Christian. Any final thoughts you have before we get out of here this time?
Just for episode 6, a banger of an episode. Probably the most action we've gotten throughout the entire series. I mean, the action was great. It was just nice to finally see Numenor. Everyone's excuse me, everyone's coming through Middle Earth. Galadriel, she's not mad or sad anymore. She's kind of just is. We'll see what
She's
happens.
pretty mad still. She
Oh, yeah,
nearly
that's
killed the
true.
dark elf.
Yeah. See, I'm sorry. I'm so tired. And I do apologize.
This is why we get out of here. Christian is about to fall asleep on the microphone.
Not true. It has been a long day, but no. Yeah. Episode 5 and 6, both banger episodes. I really hope that 7 and 8 deliver. I mean, next week's the penultimate episode. If this is anything like Game of Thrones, where it's like usually with Game of Thrones, the penultimate episode is where like the big things, the climax happens, and
Mhm.
then episode 10, the season finale is usually the cool down and the setup for the next season. Hopefully,
Mhm.
we'll get the same thing here. I think a lot of TV shows could definitely benefit from that, just because, But I mean, I feel like I don't know what else there is for. I mean, obviously, I want to see more of the Hardfoots. That's what I want to
Mm.
see. And I
Yeah,
want to know who the mystery man is. I want to know where
it's
Sauron's at.
Gandalf. It's
Yeah,
Gandalf.
it has to be at this point. I mean, like who else would it be? Like, because they really want people like, hey, if you like Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson films, you need to watch this. And it's like, why? Well, because we get Mount Doom with Galadriel, we have Isildur
Mhm.
is there, we have the Maker of the Rings, and I mean, why would Sauron not be there? But I mean, they kind of danced
Mhm.
around it a little bit within episode 6, where they're like, "Ooh, where's Sauron?" And
Yeah.
that stupid orc. Oh, I was so mad. I was like, "Let him finish! Let him finish!" He was about to say something, but honestly, great episodes 5 and 6 so far. Hopefully, they can keep the momentum going.
Yeah, I hope they can get the momentum going as well. Like I said, I do think it would be really funny if this next episode was just all about Nori and
It
Mystery
needs to
Man
be.
/ Gandalf.
Just like we
And
got
then,
last week with She-Hulk, Just Jen. We need an episode of
yeah,
just Nori.
just Nori. Yeah.
Nothing but Nori. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe they'll do that. And then episode 8, they'll come back to the volcano. I don't know if they'll do that, but that would be really
No.
funny. I will say, though, speaking of the one thing of episode 5 that we hadn't really got to yet is the connection they made to Pippin's song, which
Oh
I
my
thought
gosh,
was really
that's
great.
right. During
Yeah,
the very beginning of the episode. Thank you for reminding me. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, that was
Love
a
it.
really great moment.
I gotta
Yeah, that
listen to
was
that on
really cool. Yeah,
Spotify.
so that was really cool. Because one of the great things about this whole universe and the lore of it all is that it's so deep and rich and layered. And even in the Lord of the Rings, without knowing the full context of everything,
Mhm.
you do sense that they are they're a part of history of this universe that has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and there's a lot of lore that came before them, and
Mhm.
that certainly was one of them. As he's singing that song, you do get a sense that it's been around for God
Or
knows how long. And
seriously.
to get it in this context, in episode 5, it just speaks to the how something can stand the test of time.
And that was
Uh,
the same song, right? Or is
yeah, I
that
believe so. Yeah.
okay, okay, that's what I thought. I was like, it sounded so familiar. I was like, "Oh, that's a nice tune." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wait a minute, I've heard this
Yeah.
before."
So I thought that was really cool. I'm sure someone on YouTube has already put them back to back in some sort of a way.
Oh, I'm about
I'd
to look
I'd be
it up,
curious
yeah,
to
that's
go check that
amazing.
out.
Yeah.
Because YouTube and TikTok work really fast in that regard. So
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sure it's out there somewhere. I'm curious to go check that out. But yeah, I thought that was really great. I mean, these last 2 episodes, on the whole, I have my
Mhm.
criticisms, obviously, but on the whole, I think they've been good. They've been building some great momentum. And episode 6, really, I have some problems with the writing at times, particularly with Galadriel, as we noted. But
Mhm.
even in that, there's still that great moment speaking to how consumed she is by her own vengeance. I'm really curious to see how that unfolds
I wanna see
and how
that
that
too.
goes forward. And then the action, everything about that is great. It ends on a wonderful note as well. Yeah, I know it's interesting because I started off this whole conversation talking about how I love that this show is taking its time and really building up these characters, even if it's been uneven, it hasn't been perfect,
Yeah.
but I like that about shows like this. And yet, my second favorite episode is the one that is action packed and very Lord of the Ringsy.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what that says, but um, I did enjoy episode 6 a lot. I
Yeah,
do think, given what it was doing as far as really getting the snowball to go down the hill,
payoff is
it did
great.
that in a really great way. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to see where things go. I do imagine episode 7 will deal with the whole volcano thing.
It
Um,
better. I mean, I
but
saw a little bit of the preview that they showed, right after the episode, I finished the episode. It's like Galadriel's, like, in all this ash, and it's, like,
no
red.
spoilers.
Well, that's literally all they show.
Yeah. No, so we'll see. We'll get together. We'll talk about it
Yeah.
next week. Hopefully, Christian and I can find some time to meet next week because I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about after next week's episode.
I'm
So
sure there will be as well, for sure. I'm very
we'll
excited.
try to make that work. Thanks for listening, everybody. Again, if you want to get early access to these episodes, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Thank you to our patrons. Thank you to everyone else listening as well, no matter how you support the show. It really means a lot to us. And thank you, Christian, for joining me once again, man. I always love getting to do this with you.
Oh, dude, likewise. We are in the height of, like, just all things fantasy, as I keep saying, and
Yeah.
it really feels like the early 2000s again. I love
Yep.
it.
Uh, yeah, it's been great. I've been loving this as well. A couple of quick plugs, and then we'll get out of here. So, on our latest episode, we talked about "Don't Worry, Darling" on episode 501. So go and check that out. And also, Studio Ghibli's "Whisper of the Heart." You've seen that film, right, Christian?
Yeah,
You like
I
it?
think it's quite possibly my favorite Studio Ghibli film. I go back and forth between that and, like,
Mm,
Howl's Moving Castle, like, all the time, but I love Whispers of the Heart. I actually finished listening to the episode, earlier
yeah.
today, and I was like, "Yeah, it's so good." Yeah, I
We
love
had a great time talking about that movie. So,
mhm.
yeah, definitely go check that out. And then also, I want to plug the new extra film that's coming out. which actually might be the same day as this goes to Patreon. But again, if you're from the public, you're listening to this after it goes live, I do want to plug our latest extra film because Ryan and Sophia are talking about the one and only Goodfellas. So, big episode.
That's like one of my favorite movies.
Big episode.
Ever.
Definitely go and check it out. And you know what else they're talking about there, Christian?
What?
Blonde. This movie on Netflix about Marilyn Monroe that people have been talking about.
I'm still gonna watch that.
So,
I might watch that this weekend.
Yeah, so 2 movies that are 17 hours long each. It's gonna be a long show, but it should be a fun one. Definitely go and check all that out. And again, thanks, Christian, for being here. Really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully we'll get together very soon to talk episode 7 of the Rings of Power. All right, we will see you all next time.
See you guys.